I've been saying paint it ain't for a long time. And it's like, look, if you want to paint it, call a painter. We're industrial flooring company.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Colbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Colbert, and today is a very special episode. It's a slight divergence from what we normally do. Call it an expert corner, if you will. Today's guest is an absolute authority on industrial flooring, and we're going to talk about many of the things he's faced in facilities and the solutions that he's provided. Back in 2000, he founded Redstone Industrial Flooring, quickly building a reputation across New England for high-performance epoxy flooring and an unwavering commitment to quality. From the beginning, he made the strategic decision to hire and train a full-time team instead of relying on subcontractors. That choice allowed his company to deliver consistent results and handle sensitive, highly specialized environments with precision and care. Under his leadership, Redstone became one of the region's top industrial flooring contractors. When the company was acquired by Coludus in 2014, he took on the role of Director of Industrial Flooring, continuing to grow customer relationships and serve as a subject matter expert, offering technical guidance on the best performing systems for every unique need. And I'm proud to say we have been friends for years and we've been colleagues for over a decade. So let's get into it. Doug Blake, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Glad you're here, man.
Yeah, glad to be here. It's good.
Look at that. Our first podcast together.
That's it. That's good.
You are, I'll let the audience know that Doug doesn't take himself too seriously. And he's like, look, people, we're just talking about glue and rocks here. It's nothing, too complicated, right? Did I quote you correctly, Doug?
That is true. Yeah. Glue and rocks.
All right. Fair
the
enough.
Epoxy being the glue and all the rocks we put in it of various kinds.
All right. So you have a ridiculous amount of experience. You've seen more things than I'll probably ever see with resinous flooring. And all that being said, if you were to pick one, what's been your biggest lesson learned?
I think, the best lesson learned, like when I started the company, really understanding this is technical stuff, understanding first off, why are there so many kinds of systems? People say, epoxy, I want epoxy, or I want a sealer. And it's like, it's a broad topic. And so really digging into, from my end, the technical aspects of, why this system versus that system, why, in some cases, this vendor versus another one. Obviously, cheaper isn't always better by a long shot, but really just understanding, there's reasons why these companies make all these different kind of systems. They're all made for different applications and different site conditions, et cetera. And that really, making sure that you have a good understanding of what you're dealing with and selling, first off, and then, asking a lot of questions of customers and listening to the answers, really listening, what their issues are, what they've been experiencing in the past, what the conditions are, the reason that they need whatever they're asking for to be done, and then building from there, not going in assuming I want to sell this to them because I don't really care which system. I want to sell the one that's going to work the best and last the longest.
I've seen you do this, Doug. Yeah, it's like you're an inspector, almost like a doctor, really examining what's really going on here. And yeah. I've seen you firsthand many times do that deep level of questioning to get to where you really should be, or where to get the client or the facility where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, really. I mean, my goal setting out was primarily as a focus, large manufacturing companies with, it's going to be repeat, build the business over years, not expecting that, you're going to go in and get everything done all at once. And working in really challenging environments and, raising to that level of being able to perform in all kinds of really challenging places and being a problem solver.
Perfect. And I know it's been appreciated because I've seen that side of it as well. So, and certainly learned plenty from you about it. So I'll share with the listeners what Doug and I did prior to getting live here on the show is we really categorically looked at the flooring business and how it relates to whether it's a food plant, whether it's a defense contractor or any other type of manufacturing or facility. And what are the most common things that have been faced over the years and the solutions that, Doug, you've provided? And we thought that would be the highest level of value to really land it for everybody. So what we did, the first category is really slip, trip, and fall hazards and, joint repair, and the effect that has on everything from safety to forklift repair to even product damage. So, Doug, do you want to explain a little bit about, so what have you faced with the slip, trip, and fall and joint repair over the years? What have been the best solutions? Maybe some
Sure.
examples.
Yeah, I mean, we got into early in the business, getting really into the way more than just coatings, like really getting into heavy duty mortar repairs. Joints are always a big problem. That's where a lot of the failures at least start in facilities. And going in and, you can't just fill a big, wide, spalled, cracked up joint with flexible joint material. You can temporarily, it's going to fail very quickly and you're back in the same boat. I mean, I had a major dairy who in their giant coolers, I mean, these coolers are, 20,000 feet size each. They said that they were spending something like, $30,000 a quarter on forklift repairs and spilt product because running over the joints. And, you get into this facility, it's 40 degrees, it's soaking wet. What can you do in those environments? And coming up with a system that come out, when the joints are really bad, instead of just filling them, you got to saw cut them out, open them, fill them with mortar to build the mortar back again, then cut a nice new joint, then fill the joint. That's the repair, doing the resurfacers. One of my stories, a major paint manufacturer down in New Jersey. Actually, we did a tremendous amount of work for. Their floors were in terrible shape, like hadn't been done ever. They would just roll hundreds of coats of paint over the years on the floor because they made paint. And we went down, started redoing their floors with power trowel epoxy mortar, and really resurfacing these floors. And the general manager told me after one of the projects that the forklift driver had been there for years, saw him the Monday after we got done and got off the forklift and hugged him and said, "Thank you so much. My back's been killing me for years." And so, that's the kind of stuff. So, just from an employee happiness standpoint, but really for safety reasons, obviously. And then again, to, spilled products and forklift repairs and things, coatings aren't going to fix those things that the floors look like the surface of the moon.
Right.
You need to be able to go in and do heavy duty resurfacers that are going to, A, repair it, and B, hold up over the long haul.
So the advice you'd give would be just really tackle it like an industrial project. Don't put a patch on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And really, you've got to cut the whole thing out and rebuild it.
Oh yeah, many times. I mean,
Yeah.
stuff we run into on a regular basis is joints where they've tried and they keep getting wider and wider. I'm sure your audience of facilities managers know what I'm talking about. You can't just, on a half-inch wide, three-quarter-inch wide spalled joint, just squish some more joint material in there. It's going to work for a couple of months and then it's going to pop out again. And if it just gets worse and worse, you need to take the time, cut it out, do it right, rebuild the whole system, and then put the joint in. That's the real fix.
Any advice around, or is it worth us getting into the different types of joints? Would that be educational, expansion, isolation, etc.?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the most joints you see in most buildings are control joints that they cut in. They don't go all the way through the slab. They're just there to, as the concrete's originally curing, so that it controls where the cracking is going to be, because there's going to be some kind of cracks somewhere in every slab. And so that's the most common and the ones you see the most. And depending on, how they cut them when they originally built the slab, they can be, 12 feet on center, 15 on center, whatever. Then you get the other joints are expansion joints, where it's truly cut all the way through the slab, allowing for expansion and contraction. Those joints are wider, they're deeper, when you fill those, you have to do it in a different method and put, backer rod underneath and honor the joint, it's called, on all these systems, honoring the joints correctly. And then there's isolation joints, which would be, you have a pad that's got machines that vibrate, or there's machines that vibrate and you don't want this one piece to vibrate, so you isolate it with a big joint all the way around it, again cut all the way through the slab. And then cold joints, which are just where you did an expansion on the building, and where the old slab and the new slab meet is also a joint, and that's called a cold joint. So they all need to be addressed somewhat differently, but understanding what you're looking at makes a lot of difference. And the big thing with joints, when you put any kind of thicker floor down, anything beyond the coating system, you need to mark where all the joints are, lay the floor, put the mortar down, then saw cut through the new mortar, then fill the joints before the top coats. That's how you do it, so that you don't, if you just tried to lay mortar over a joint, that even if the joint was previously filled, the floor is going to crack. You're going to see hairline cracks. We have a customer in New Hampshire, very large customer, that was exactly their situation. They had a very large mortar floor done, and the people cut the corners without they didn't cut the joints. They didn't honor the joints, and a couple of years later, all the joints are cracking. And so then it's a much bigger and more extensive and expensive repair to come in and fix them all while they're in operation.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is you're going towards preventive maintenance too, or doing it right and being preventive about it, not reactionary.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess let me ask you, Doug, we've had a lot of EH&S professionals on the show and obviously in our world every day, right? So if you were an EHS professional, what other types of things as an inspector would you advise them on, walking into their plant, regardless of the type of process they were doing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, go around and just, inspect the floor. I mean, being in this business as long as I have, I go into buildings, I kind of don't look up. I'm automatically looking at the floors and finding things like, sure, one slab's raised a half an inch over the other one. That's a whole nother scenario than just fixing a joint, and then coming up with, ways, depending on how bad and how far it is, to correct that by either grinding down one side, or sometimes if it's really bad and not feasible to grind down, ramp out with mortar that's stronger than the concrete and get rid of it that way and make it so it kind of disappears with mortar. But
Excellent.
yeah, I mean, those kind of things. And obviously, spalled, beat up concrete, beyond the general cleanliness in a facility, which obviously can cause problems. Sometimes the slabs are just, they need resurfacing. They need more than a coat, the coat of something. They need something that's really going to resurface the floor to get it so it's in a good, safe condition.
Great advice, Doug. And really important. Safety drives a lot of the conversations we have around flooring. So thanks for expanding on that a bit.
Sure.
Let's move over to rapid return to service. And maybe you can just, I'll just leave that right there with you, and you can talk about what that means, why it's important. Of course, our audience knows what it is, but let's talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, going in, as a contractor, understanding, then the more you do this, and again, a lot of repeat customers, you're in these places, fortunately, for years, being their go-to floor guy, facilities person in that regard. The cost to a company to shut down their production and, sometimes move equipment out of our way, et cetera, is as much or sometimes more than the cost of having the floor installed. So products that, they have to perform, above all, but ones that you can have cure quicker, have a thicker system that's gonna, really do the job, but faster, it makes all the difference in the world. And, nowadays, I mean, there's products that cure in 4 hours. That cure, some of the ones we use are traditional standard 8-hour cure cycles, but we have plenty of products that'll cure in half that time. We have in really specialized situations, stuff like MMA that'll cure in 1 hour, even in ice cold temperatures. The downside of that one is it smells really bad when you do it. However, it's something in the bag of tricks. They work really well. They perform really well. And if you can deal with the odors while you're installing it, sometimes that's the answer. But one way or another, planning, having everything there ahead of time, having the operations people, our operations people see the job, everything's delivered ahead of time, and when it's time to go, you're there, whatever that is, at, 11 o'clock at night, or, a Saturday morning, or whatever it is, and using materials that are going to cure quick. And again, sometimes with the gun to our head, working with the cure cycles. So instead of, well, we finish this coat, we'll be back tomorrow. If you don't have a lot of time, you work, if it's an 8-hour cure cycle, we get done, we're back 8 hours later to do the next coat, whatever time that 8 hours clock is. And then, obviously people have to sleep. So sometimes it's 2 crews. I mean, we've done some crazy things over the years. I've done for one of my very, very long time and very large customers, 11,000 foot troweled epoxy mortar with 3 different colors on it, tile removal in 3.5 days, start to finish, including
Wow.
removing 11,000 feet of tile, starting on a Friday afternoon and finishing on Monday. That's really not working with fast materials. That's working with multiple crews
Mm-hmm.
and just getting in, again, working with the cure cycle. So, if that's what needs to be done, then, you gotta, that's the business we're in.
So the advice you'd give to, say a facility manager or engineer, if they have a super tight time frame coming up, what would they ask, say you, Doug? Like they didn't know you, right? But what advice would you give a facility manager? Say, hey, look, if you've got 2 days to get something done, here are the questions I'd say you should ask X party coming
Sure.
in.
I mean, what kind of systems are you going to use? How are you going to get this done? And this, I mean, sometimes the answer is we can't, but usually we can. It may involve, again, some more expensive products, things that, cure in 4 hours, polyaspartic coatings that cure way faster than epoxy and are really superior in a lot of ways. However, they also cost twice as much per gallon as epoxy does. So, those things. But again, the value on the opposite side of that is you're getting them their production facility back where they can be on it and running and making money and not having it tied up with a flooring crew. So, and, do they have the right equipment? Do they have backup equipment? What's the plan? I mean, these are all specialized machines we come in and prep with. And, if we're on the road, which I've done, countless times, and have a crew in, northern Vermont, and a machine goes down, and it's one of the primary machines, not a hand grinder, but, a blast track machine, a big diametric grinder, something like that, have an extra one, in the truck, as opposed to, you can't run to Home Depot and grab another one. So having that backup plan, whenever possible. And so that's the kind of things to really dig in deep, especially in, a larger size project, something that's important, what is the plan on how you're going to get this done? And, the contractor should be able to kind of lay that out. I'm going to have 2 crews. I'm going to have, if we need 1 blast track, we're bringing 2, et cetera, that kind of stuff to make sure.
Excellent.
Yeah. They're the things that matter.
We have a lot of people in the life science pharmaceutical space who tune in and listen and are members of Facility Rockstars, Doug. So that being said, you've got a pretty strong case study going right now where you worked very closely with our operations group.
Yep.
For a pharmaceutical plant in Rhode Island. I know it's an upcoming project, but could you, for their benefit here, because I think it was in the millions, it was costing them per day to shut down. Am I accurate with that?
Yeah. When the shutdown is going to happen, it's upcoming. They're telling me it's $30 million a day for every day that they're shut down, that they're losing in production, which is
not a small number.
Yeah, substantial amount of money. And so, yeah, we got involved in this. The standard systems that are being proposed and used in other parts of this plant are all slow cure, very complicated, 7, 8 steps, something like 8 to 10 days they're telling them to get the floor back from when they start with the system that they're talking about. And we were able to come in and get them what they needed and cut that time down to like 4 days. By using, again, fast cure materials that are going to perform and hold up to, in a pharmaceutical plant, to all the aggressive cleaners and all of those kinds of things. But, just understanding the whole palette of products that are out there, kind of manufacturer aside, is how I always look at these things. It's like, you know, do I have my favorite vendors? Sure. But if they don't have the thing that's going to work and somebody else does, and it's a vetted product and it's something that we're familiar with or can get familiar with, that's what I'm going to recommend. Without looking at, gee, well, I'm used to this rep and he's my buddy and I want to sell his stuff. It's really more about like, this is what it's going to get the job done. Because in the long run, we're there to take care of the customer. We're there to take care of their needs in the shortest possible time. And, by working through on this particular one, we're able to secure a very large contract for this upcoming job.
It's great info. And you also faced, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a challenge under some tight areas where the prep couldn't be achieved as well as the other areas, but you did bring a solution for that as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, underneath, in place equipment in a pharma plant, in an active pharma plant. I mean, the other company straight up said, we can't do it. We're not going to do it. We're not, if you want it under the machines, we're not doing it. And, we looked at it again, kind of dug into the memory bank of different things we can do. And we were able to get small prep equipment in there and like minimally prep, but prep enough because again, it's under machines. No one's driving forklifts over this floor, but it still has to bond, and scratch the floor up, abrade it, put down a base coat of epoxy with this additive called Super Stick. And just the name says what it is. It's an adhesion enhancer, and put that down first, build our system on top of it. We did it in a test area in the exact conditions, let it cure, came down with an alcometer, a pull test, and did pulls on it, and it exceeded what the recommended pulls are, meaning the stuff stuck exactly like it's supposed to. And solved a huge problem for them because they wanted the floors done under the equipment as well for, obvious reasons. They're redoing a lot of the facility, and this is, an important part of their operation. And when they close down and spend $30 million a day, is not spend, but have it coming out of their profits, they want to get the thing done right and get everything they need done. So that was a great solution, working with one of our vendors. And it's proven to be very successful.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Doug, because maybe when sometimes we think or someone else has said no, and we think there's not a way to get it done, there probably is a way to get it done. It just needs to be re-engineered or rethought.
Yeah, usually, yeah. And, working close with our operations guys, and we got some talented guys in operations who were fully on board with the actual how to get it prepped and how to like accomplish getting in there. So, several visits and thinking this thing through and what about this and what about that? And, we're able to come up with something that works.
Nice.
Yeah.
Before I ask you for the next example here, Doug, I'd love to just have some fun for a moment and say, when someone calls you and says, hey, Doug, I'd like you to come out and see if you can paint my floor. What do you say?
Paint it ain't.
That's right. I've adopted that and I thoroughly enjoy using it. We always have a good laugh. So, yeah. Wait, why do you say that, actually?
Because it's not. And people, we're going to paint our floor with epoxy or whatever. And, it just immediately, this business is way beyond, rolling a coat of paint out. And there's a lot more involved. And it's just something I've been saying prior to becoming part of Coludis Painting, this giant painting company. I've been saying paint it ain't for a long time. And it's like if you want to paint it, call a painter. We're industrial flooring company.
Well said. Well said. And to that point, it's like, because it's about solutions. It's not about a quick fix, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so before we get off the rapid return to service, because this is arguably one of the biggest things we face, right? Regardless of the type of facility, you've been in you already mentioned dairy. There's a cheese plant that I'd love you to talk about for a minute. Just really kind of land like, what was the solution? And then there was a Mediterranean foods plant as well.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of work for, again, I guess I can say names, Cedars Mediterranean Foods, huge facility, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation, always wet, always cold, always getting inspected. Floors wear out in these environments, and, we're able to come in with fast cure materials. And, at times we have to bring in, torches to flash dry something or something like that, put the material down, put accelerators in there so the stuff cures in 4 hours instead of 8. And, do the same with the top coat and get in and out. The Cabot job, Cabot cheese, they have a room that's, I mean, dairies are 7-day-a-week operations, obviously, and, cows don't know it's Christmas. There's, it's no matter what, the milk's coming all the time. And this is a particular area where they couldn't like pre-make and store stuff to the side for more than like a couple of days maximum, and had this one area that's just full of tanks and pipes and whatever. And, they wanted to do it. They wanted to do it, honestly, for a couple of years. We do other work for them, and they kept talking about this room. And they're like, well, maybe we can do it in halves. And, explaining to them, really, it's going to take us the same amount of time. The room's going to be shut down for the same amount of time to do half as it is all of it. Because it's not like you can walk across the half we're doing to get to the other side. And, again, talking to our operations guys, looking at the job and coming up with, they said the most they could ever shut down for was 3 days. We got them to agree to, and, they had to work things out on their end, shut down for 5 days and do the entire space. And then we sent up, again, 2 crews, 1 crew prep. The minute the prep crew was done, they left. Other guys coming in, installing. We got the thing done in 3.5 days. And it's performing great. And they were able to get back in operation doing what they do and making excellent cheese. And, that's the kind of stuff.
Great solution.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that, you need to do.
And like you said, they're always cold, they're always wet, and it's a compressed time frame. And that's really that's the biggest thing here, whether it's pharma, cheese, Mediterranean foods, or defense contract, doesn't really matter, right?
Sure.
The solutions are similar. So I'd like to talk about, this better than anybody, Doug, the places, a lot of times we'll work in, and most of the places listening right now, or people listening, there's a certain way they operate. They're regulated spaces, whether it's OSHA, FDA, USDA, whatever it might be, whatever the governing authority is, DOD, right?
Yep.
So us knowing how to lay a floor or create a solution, or not us, but anyone coming in to help a facility, where I'm going with this, Doug, is we operate the way they operate, or we better understand how they operate. Sure. Because we could lay a good floor. It doesn't matter if we can't behave properly and live within.
100%. I mean, the things I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of, long-term, I mean, in some cases, more than 20 years, large defense contractor customers. And, getting into these places, getting the first job is one thing, and that's a whole process unto itself. But really getting in there and it's a whole nother world. And all, the floor is almost not an afterthought, but like a given. Yes, we assume you're going to put in a good floor. It's all the other stuff involved, all the safety things, like, sitting down with the EH&S manager and really, understanding, I mean, this is where we're going to move stuff. This is how we're going to move it. This is where it's going to be stored. Do we need, flammable cabinets to store some of the stuff that we have that might be, that could be flammable? I mean, those products are getting less and less, but, back in the day, I mean, we would bring in 55-gallon drums of solvent as part of the process, So understanding all that, obviously the electrical requirements, making sure, everything, the CFGIs and all the cords are inspected. And, I've been in still to this day, a very large customer of ours. And I remember our first time in, and they were literally there inspecting with a glove the shovels handles. And I'm like, what are you doing? This is, by the way, at midnight on our first time ever in there. And he's like, we're looking for splinters. And I'm like, wow, that's a level of, you don't typically see. But, I always preach to the crew. It's like, rather than be like, oh, they're such a pain to work with. It's like, no, this is what it is. If we operate like this and raise to that level on a consistent basis, have everything spelled out, when we roll into other places, and I have been personally told in other places that maybe are less stringent, geez, you guys' safety programs are better than ours, which is a really nice thing to hear. But that's really what it's about, and of course the background checks and the drug checks and all the rest of the stuff that gets you know, required to get into a lot of these kind of companies. So that goes back to, my original belief and still today of having, not just what sub can I find that I got to get this thing done and whatever, you guys available, having fully trained crews who understand, this is what happens. And when you get done with the job, this kind of waste goes in this kind of container and that one goes in that container, and walking around and inspecting, making sure we're not leaving, coffee cups and whatever, rollers and stuff around, looking for FOD. I mean, a lot of the reasons for years, the floors we do, a lot of these big defense contractors in particular pick really light colors because they want to see anything that's on the floor for FOD, foreign objects and debris. And so we can't be creating more FOD, we just, all those things are the things that really make the difference in a long run, getting, working in these kind of environments. And again, being more than a one and done in a place and being like, okay, we know that we can rely on these guys. They're going to do it right. They're going to start when they say, they're going to finish when they say, et cetera. And things aren't going to fall apart.
Hey, rock stars. If you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. It's interesting that you positioned the floor as almost an afterthought, because you're right. If you can't do everything else, then don't bother doing. You won't get to the floor.
I mean, a lot of guys can put a floor down, but not a lot of guys can operate in some of these environments on a consistent basis.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to. So I want to pick your brain as much as I can here, Doug, in a compressed time frame, on as many topics for the benefit of the audience, right? And the topic I wanted to go to was ESD, just briefly, maybe. But many of our listeners may need that and may not understand what goes into it. So can you just expand? And I know you have a good example of this too, or maybe a couple. What is ESD? Where would it be needed? And what to look out for? What questions to ask?
Sure. Well, ESD floors, I mean, the reason you have them, it dissipates the static. It pulls the static charge off of you, dissipates out through the floor, and goes to an earth ground somewhere. So that, in the electronics world where you see it most, there's static dissipative floors. So they go up to a certain level. And that's for, damage to sensitive components and things like that. You get, in the electronics world, latent damage where a chip could be damaged, but you don't know it until they put it in operation and it's, in some device somewhere. And all of a sudden there's a little weak spot in there and the thing fails. And it went back to, there was a static event when the thing was being manufactured or transported somewhere that damaged it. Before it was fully assembled. And then, the other side is conductive floors where, at times, people that have things that, blow up. So you need a higher level of conductivity. A big thing is understanding what they are and why you have them. And then, making sure you got the right system that's going to prove over the long haul. Part of our thing when we install ESD floors, and I've done many of them, at this point, I'm sure millions of square feet of ESD floors, is testing the floor and making sure after the fact. And, thankfully one of our vendors, that's part of what they do. There's no charge for it. We put in the floor, they come in, they're certified inspectors for ESD, and they do a report and give you a report. And then they'll come back and test it, once a year or whatever, if you want. But really getting the right system. And, the thing with ESD floors nowadays is you can really kind of get you can get a decorative floor and make it ESD with flakes in it. It doesn't all have to be, ugly gray. We still do ugly gray when people want that. But there's a lot of different things you can do and be conductive. I mean, we have ESD Novolac for heavy acid resistance and things that's also conductive. We have ESD vinyl Ester floors for really extreme chemical conditions. that, specialized products. You don't use them every day, but, and sometimes static is just for nuisance. It's, for some of the solutions we have, they're not that much of an upcharge. And I remember doing a plastics extrusion plant, and they had, the extruders are building up this big static charge because of the way the equipment operates, and the plastic going through it, and walk up to the machine, and guys are getting sparks when they touch the machine. Put down a static dissipated floor, and obviously wear the right footwear so that your floor is in contact with the charge on your body, and problem solved, really, by just changing the top coat. But so there's a lot of places you can do ESD floors. They work just as well as a non-ESD floor. They're just as durable. You can get them in almost the same wide range of colors, and it's a great option. And in some many places, it's a necessity.
Yeah, great run through, Doug. And I love that you mentioned the latent damage, because like it's too late at that point. But yeah, literally, it's already gone. It's gone into production operations. So you touched on a couple of things quickly, and because you're a flooring guru, you flew through it. But I want to back you up to Novolac and vinyl ester, just for the benefit of our listeners. Like, if they're not aware of why a battery acid area is always failing, or what are those products and where could they be used? Or should they be used?
So things like, Novolac epoxy, which is just a kind of epoxy. It's not a brand or something. It's a higher chemical resistant epoxy that's going to hold up to acids much better. And so again, battery charging areas, you may not need it everywhere in your plant, but if you have a battery, battery forklifts, and you have a battery charging area, inevitably those batteries are going to boil over at some point. They're going to drip on the floor, and it's going to eat into if it's just concrete, it's going to eat into the concrete. If you etch a floor, that's what you do it with, acid. It's meant to eat kind of the top of the concrete, and even normal epoxies, it's eventually going to erode it and eat through it. So Novolac epoxy will prevent that, or extend the life of the floor dramatically. And then in really high chemical, really nasty corrosive chemicals and things, we have vinyl esters, which are, what they do tank linings with and stuff like that. So you can, again, my approach, and I have many buildings over the years where we did a much less expensive system in 95% of the place, and then, over here, you need this just for this one piece. And, just having all those things in the bag of tricks is really, the answer. You don't need it everywhere necessarily.
Great education. That you just said something that prompted me to think about a story you told. It was I forget the company, doesn't matter. They were looking
I got lots of stories.
They're good ones. Doug, you have a good example of someone, I believe, requested a lighter weight system or a lower cost system. And you said, look, I really advise you do a smaller section with the right fix. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, what that was, it's a company that pretty good sized plant, 35, 40,000 square foot manufacturing floor. This company had just bought the building. When the building was built, not that long prior, I mean, I think the thing was up for 4 or 5 years, and the whole thing had been done in epoxy, an epoxy slurry, actually, very kind of pretty looking floor. The company moving in made really heavy duty valves for the oil industry, like huge equipment, big, heavy stuff. I had another customer that was essentially in the same business, so I kind of knew what was going to, the abuse this place was going to take. That aside, they called me. I went in. They told me afterwards, had, I think, 5 other contractors. They were just looking for a price. They wanted to make the thing pretty before they moved in, and everyone came in and looked and gave them a price to put a new top coat on this floor. I go in, every 50 feet, I'm seeing moisture blisters in their existing floor. I'm like, you guys got a problem here. They had no idea. And I'm walking around showing them, this is a blister, and so on throughout the plant. I'm like, if it was me, I would not recoat this floor, period. Take it off, take it down to bare concrete, put in a moisture mitigation system underneath, and then do a heavy duty epoxy mortar that's going to hold up to what you guys are going to do in here. And, thankfully they listened to me, and we went in, and piece by piece by piece. So they took their budget that they were going to have this whole facility, pretty new floor, and put that budget on, probably a quarter of the plant if it was a quarter of it. But the system we put down to this day, and that example, that's probably 18 years ago when we first went in that facility, the floor is still holding up fantastic. Company's actually been sold. We put logos in the floor that are still there. They're covering with mats right now. But the floors we put in did the trick. And in the long run, like they kind of got it, which was good. And then piece by piece over a period of, 4 or 5 years, they had everything they needed to get done in that plant done with a floor that's going to hold up correctly and not have to deal with had they spent whatever it was going to be, $70,000 or something on recoating the floor, they would have had a shiny new floor that a year later would have had moisture blisters popping everywhere, and that would have just literally thrown the money away. So, that they're a great customer. We're going to be back in there soon. I think new owners are trying to change the color designs and whatnot, but we're going to go over the floors we did, which are still down tight, no moisture issues anywhere.
So this is another example of you walking in as an inspector, where what I've heard you say, where others came in, will recoat the floor, not even noticing a moisture issue in the floor, and you caught that. That was a critical catch.
Sure.
So
yeah. Whether you noticed it or just didn't want to talk about it, but
fair enough.
They wanted the sale,
Mm-hmm.
So
and it's not about the sale; it's about the solution. Right.
Absolutely.
And so let's talk about moisture for a minute, because I'm sure many listening are aware of what moisture is in a concrete slab. Some aren't, right? If we say we want to do moisture tests and they said, no, there's no water in the floor, there's no moisture. Can you talk about that? Like, really, what does it mean?
Sure. Well, moisture in concrete, there's moisture when they pour the concrete. So that you have to deal with when it's a new slab, even if they did a vapor barrier under the slab and everything's working perfectly, people think, oh, in 30 days is the thing people love to throw around in this industry for years. It's ready for epoxy. By no means is that necessarily true. Sometimes it is, many times it's not. It takes a long time to get water out of concrete. But the real problem is most buildings don't have vapor barriers under them. There are many old concrete floors all over the Northeast and obviously other parts of the country. And it's not like, the floor has got to be visibly wet. Many times, most times, you can't tell looking at the floor if it's got a moisture problem or not. Sometimes you can if you know what to look for, but most times you can't. That's why you test for it. And it's not water coming through the floor, it's water vapor. Concrete's porous, it breathes. And so the moisture it could be 20 feet under the building, but it's constantly working its way up through and going in. And so when you put your HVAC system on, that's extracting moisture from the air. It's changing the humidity level. And so it's trying to equalize. So more water comes up. As the building's sealed tight and you put on HVAC, the moisture level when all the windows are open and there's no HVAC going on, everything's fine. The minute you seal it all up, now you just change the environment and that moisture wants to come up and it's going to keep coming up. And you put a coat of plastic over it, which essentially is what epoxy is. Epoxy doesn't breathe. Plastic doesn't breathe. So you need something to either bond and keep it down to an acceptable level where it's not going to let go, or something that's going to, and really what happens is the way the systems have evolved is it does allow for the moisture to come through. It just very much reduces the rate that it comes out. So it won't blow the top coats off. And so, there's liquid epoxy, waterproofing membranes. And then there's nowadays, urethane cement, which is probably the best moisture mitigation there is. Even they have their limits at times, and without going too far down in the weeds of other things in conjunction with moisture, the moisture combines with the salts in the concrete, etc. That's what causes the blisters. Sometimes it's just like floor covering isn't really going to work. Maybe you want to just do polished concrete, because then you just had shiny, protected, nice concrete that's in good shape, but it can still breathe and allow moisture to come through. So again, moisture is a tricky one. There's, it's the number one thing that leads to flooring failures across the board. And whether it's carpet or tile or epoxy, moisture causes major problems in buildings. So, A, being aware of it, B, testing for it. And, if you're doing the test for the moisture. And then at the moisture side, maybe you want to do cores and see what else is going on in that slab as well. Because there's, again, sometimes it's bad concrete, or it's very high pH concrete, or there's contaminants in it, or a combination of all of those things. So the testing up front, it's sometimes a challenging discussion to have with somebody. They're looking for a price on the floor and say, well, before I can really give you good recommendations, we need to spend a couple $1,000s, or you need to spend a couple $1,000s having testing done so that we can build a system that's going to work for you. But that, it's a good discussion to have up front. And, we tend to, kind of historically always put as the first paragraph in a proposal, moisture, and a little statement about moisture and recommending moisture testing, because it's an important part of the puzzle.
Absolutely. And so you've thoroughly answered the question I'm about to re-ask, if you will, but put yourself in a facility manager's shoes. You need a system in your building, in your warehouse, your production area. What are the questions they should ask anyone who's coming in to propose a floor around moisture? What would you advise?
Yeah, I've always told people, if they get a proposal and they didn't mention moisture, then you should rethink dealing with that company, because if you read the fine print in their warranty, they are not protecting against moisture, and they're not warrantying against moisture, because you can't control the moisture, like control it. I mean, the building's going to do what it's going to do. So,
sure.
Talking about it up front, having a discussion about moisture up front, urethane cement is kind of a go-to a lot these days. So, but just making sure that whatever you're putting down, somebody has an understanding, and having some discussion about moisture. And if, A, checking for it, and B, what are you going to do if you find it? And how much does that cost?
Perfect. Great walkthrough. Yeah, and we're going to give you're going to give us your contact info, hopefully at the end of the show here. So I'm sure a lot of follow-up questions are going to happen here. With all the knowledge you have, Doug. So I want to shift a little bit from just common things to, like, what are the things you've seen gone wrong? And it could be a lack of questions on the upfront. It could be a wrong system, could be any number of things. You've seen them over the years. Like, and this is for that what to look out for section of the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what I see go wrong, and it's by no means putting any dispersions on general contractors or architects or spec writers. But, we deal with, in our business, a lot of GC jobs and specifications on some kind of system that, the architect or the spec writer put in, and you read them and it's like, what are you thinking? Why, either A, this is way overbuilt, or it's nowhere near, durable enough, or it didn't address this. There's just a lot of question the specs is, I guess, an answer. That I question the specs. You've heard me say many times, I mean, this is nuts. Why would you ever do this? And just push back on these things. So, don't just assume, if you're you're having a new building built, that the specs are right, that this is going to work best for you. Do some digging, or talk to a number of people and get some ideas, because a lot of these things are just, somebody went to a seminar 5 years ago and they saw something on epoxy floors, and, oh, you need an epoxy floor? Here it is. So that's a big mistake people make. And sometimes, I mean, really costly mistakes are because of that, and or, looking for the cheapest price and, whatever, and not digging any deeper than that. A lot of guys can, roll something on your floor. Doesn't mean they're going to prep it right. Doesn't mean they're going to understand all the, the things about, CSP numbers, concrete surface profile numbers, and you can't use a diamond grinder to get a CSP 4. Not that.
And why does CSP matter?
Because that's the profile. You want a mechanical bond of the material to the concrete, and the CSP, concrete surface profile, and they go from 1 to, well, technically 1 to 10, but what we deal with typically is you want to be in a 3, 4, 5, which you're not going to achieve with the diamond grinder. Diamond grinders are wonderful, but people that, only do diamond grinders and it'll be fine. Well, it'll be fine till it fails. And then if it fails and you put it under a microscope and say, well, there's no there's no profile in this concrete, you know, and especially if you're getting things with warranties, read the warranty. It's going to tell you in that warranty, this thing must be prepped to a certain level, a CSP3, a CSP4, or whatever it is. People need to understand this, you know, not that the facilities guy is going to necessarily remember all this, but again, it's all in the literature. And that's something, you know, when I started my business, you know, jokingly, but truthfully, read the directions and follow them. It tells you if there are these very technical details, and if there aren't, find a company that's giving you technical details on surface preparation. It really matters about the surface prep. So that's a huge thing that people make mistakes on and put in big expensive floors, and then the thing's peeling and they're like, oh my God, what happened? And, you know, many times it's something like that, where they cut corners, they didn't prep it right, or they didn't know they needed to prep it right because they didn't read the directions. You know, silly stuff, but, you know, many hundreds of thousands of dollars of losses due to improperly installed floors. And it's not like the stuff doesn't cure. It's the fact that the prep underneath and the thing isn't bonding. That's where the problems are many times.
Great advice. And I want to jump back to you. You mentioned when there's a GC involved, or an architect or a designer or an engineer, typically that's a new build, right? Or an expansion of some type. What about when there isn't a specification? What should these facility managers be asking, looking out for? And I know you've answered it, but maybe you could kind of go through that again.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, just, you know, thinking about the environment they're in, and you know, the catch-all, I want an epoxy floor. Well, you know, that can mean a million things, you know, so really people aren't going to be, you know, they're good at making whatever widget they make and doing what they do. Talk to somebody that has some understanding, ask some questions like, well, you know, why are you using this one, or et cetera. You know, the biggest thing, try to find another place where they've installed the same thing in a similar environment. You know, a lot of people push, oh, we'll come in and do a test patch, and come in and do a 5x5 or a 10x10. You know, in my opinion, you know, it proves that you can do a 5-foot section of floor and it's going to look pretty at the end. You don't know what it's going to look like a year from now or 2 years from now. Go see a building. If they've been in business for more than 6 months, they got a customer somewhere that has a similar system. Go see what it looks like 2 years down the line, 5 years down the line. Very recently on a job went and took a now new customer, which is actually a general contractor's customer. The end user came and looked at a job that I had done 16 years ago. And I'm like, it obviously is worn because they haven't redone it in 16 years. But I'm like, this is exactly what you're talking about in your building 16 years later in a very high production facility. This is what, you know, I mean, could they do some upgrades to that one I took them to? Yes. However, it still looks pretty damn good 16 years later. But whatever the scenario is, I've always been a fan of, look, come out and see a real job, you know. Come out and I can get you into a place that's going to be a similar kind of operation with a similar kind of floor, if not the exact same system. And this is what it looks like 2 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, or 5 years down the line. In this case, 16 years down the line. I think that's a really strong point that, you know, if you're going to invest a bunch of dough and shut down your facility and have this work done, take the time. You know, don't just look at a picture or a sample from the manufacturer because that's made in a lab in perfect conditions. Go see somewhere. That's going to be a big benefit.
Yeah, that's really sound advice, because it's proof. It's the proof, right? It's right there 16 years later. Yeah. And I think I want to put this out there too. Like, Doug, I know you'll offer this, as will our whole flooring team, but another smart thing for facility managers and leaders to consider is to have a flooring audit done by a professional. Have us or someone come in and just do an audit of your floor, because look at your space like an inspector. What's the use case of the floor? You know, what's the governing authority that comes in? What's the oversight here? What are your internal corporate expectations? And all these things will get met. And, you know, it almost gives, you know, the facility manager a roadmap. If they choose to take action on their floors, now they have a way of going about doing it. Would you agree?
100%. And just, you know, kind of piece by piece. It's not like, you know, go in and you have to do all of this next week and, you know, here's the bill. It's, you know, we're in places for the long haul, and, do it piece by piece as it comes up. The budget, you have the budget, you need this one, take it by priority. This one's higher priority than that one. You know, maybe you're doing it because you have customers doing walkthroughs and you want to just redo the aisle so they look pretty. Or maybe it's because, you have a serious condition here and this floor is, in the process of failing and someone's going to get hurt, or whatever. You're going to spill nasty chemicals and they're going to get down and breach into the groundwater. There's a million reasons why you need to check things out. And again, the basics of the slips, trips, and falls kind of stuff. And, again, I look at floors all day, every day. It's I see things that you might not, walking through, not really being tuned into this piece of our business.
It's a great summary. And I want to take a moment to joke again. You mentioned about a half hour. Who knows? We've been talking for a while. You said, I look down all the time. And I remember when we started working together, Doug, I'm like, well, we are a paint company. So every now and then, if you don't mind taking your hat off, look up so you can tell us about something. There's a whole facility around you. You've heard me say this about you, but I consider Doug to be quite the unicorn, and you touched on how you get into this business. And the reason I say that is it's very rare to find someone who can be self-taught on a discipline or a service like this. And you literally read the data pages and the books and the materials, and you learned how to do it. Of course, you're a lifelong learner, and it's a beautiful thing about you. The other part is you make you the unicorn because you see the big picture and you get the whole how to behave within the space, not just the niche-y technical part of the job, but how do I behave and how does my crew behave when I'm in this defense contractor's house? It's not my house, it's their house. And you get that. It makes you a unicorn in my book. So, Doug, you and I could talk for hours. We know that we've done it many times for years. But that was a lot of data. And before we close out at the end of the show, I will, like I said, ask you to share your information, how to get in touch with you, because I'm quite sure people want to reach out. But before we do that, I want to learn. I've had the pleasure of hearing all different things about your life over the years, but what does Doug Blake do outside of looking down at a concrete floor? What are you all about, man?
Yeah, these days, in the nice weather, I spend a lot of time boating. Thankfully live right near the ocean and got a nice boat and spend a lot of time on the boat with my family and friends. And I've been playing music since I was a kid, and I still keep active in that at varying degrees, but I play in a few bands. I play at an all originals band in Boston, the Muck Savages. I've tended to get in bands with goofy names. I've been in the Dixie Pricks. You can find us on Spotify, as a matter of fact, the Dixie Pricks. But another kind of crazy band that had another band called Bunt Cake Disaster. So, play music, go out in the
What
boat.
instrument?
Bass guitar primarily, some guitar, but primarily bass. The name of my boat is Second Base because my first one was Home Base.
Very fitting.
Anyway,
very fitting.
And that's like to travel and spend time with my wife, and my kids are all grown and out, but get with them when we can, and that's pretty much Doug outside of work.
I know you know this, but I'll share with the audience. I joke with Doug all the time. He has a better social life than me and most probably 20-year-olds. I think it was, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks ago, I called you on, it was a Tuesday, said, hey man, what's up for the week? You're like, yeah, I'm doing this and this with work stuff. And then tomorrow I'm going to be down in Manhattan visiting I think your daughter. Yep. And, you just looked up a band and see if you could jump on stage with them. And you did that very thing. And then you saw the video of you playing in Manhattan. Very cool.
Yep. Yeah, it was actually in Hoboken, New Jersey, over the river.
Oh, but, my bad.
But
Didn't mean to offend.
fun stuff. But yeah, I try to keep active with music, and it's my kind of escape from technical work things.
Definitely.
So yeah.
And I've had the pleasure of seeing you play a handful of times, and it's always entertaining. And you're downplaying yourself. You're a killer bassist and a great singer too.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Absolutely, man. It. All right, Doug. Well, what is the best way to have people get in touch with you if they want to talk to the guru directly?
Send me an email, dblake@colutis.com. The easy, or, my cell, if you want to, I'm happy to share it. It's
Sure. Go ahead.
978-697-3551 is my
Excellent.
cell. So either way, reach out. Happy to help wherever I can.
We'll put that in the show notes too if people didn't catch the number or the email. But yeah, I got to tell you, Doug is the most giving, helpful person in this, and he's just a cool guy to talk to. So, Doug, it's a pleasure. I'm grateful to call you a friend of many, many years, and been working with you for a long time now, man. So, thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Fun to get on Facilities Rockstars. You guys are killing it. It's good.
All right. And if everyone listening learned something, if you heard something that made you laugh, tell someone else about the show. You can find us, like Doug said, you can find him on Spotify, that we're on Spotify, and anywhere you consume your podcast. So another great episode of Facility Rockstars. Everyone have a great week. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.